Level 1. The question. You already know you should be doing something with your money. That part isn't the problem. The problem is that every time you sit down to figure out what that something actually is, you end up in the same place. A browser with 14 open tabs. A YouTube rabbit hole that started with index funds and ended somewhere around cryptocurrency and passive income, and someone on a yacht explaining financial freedom in 3 steps. And at the end of all of it, you close the laptop. You tell yourself you'll figure it out this weekend. This weekend never comes. Not because you're lazy, not because you don't care, because the question underneath the question, the one nobody actually answers cleanly, is this: should I be saving or investing? And the honest answer, the one that doesn't come with a product to sell or an affiliate link to click, is more complicated than either camp wants to admit. You are 35. You have a job. You have bills. You have a number in your head, somewhere between not enough and nowhere near enough. That represents what you currently have set aside. And you have a nagging feeling, quiet but persistent, that whatever you're doing right now is probably not the right thing. That feeling is not paranoia. That feeling is data. It is telling you that the difference between saving and investing is not just a financial distinction. It is a life distinction. And at 35, with the years ahead still long enough to matter, but short enough to feel urgent, understanding that difference is not optional anymore. So let's have the actual conversation. Not the one with the jargon, the one with the numbers, the one that shows you, specifically, what each path looks like from here. Level 2, the wake up. There is a moment. There is always a moment. Maybe it was the conversation at dinner. Someone your age mentioned their investment portfolio casually, the way people mention the weather, and you nodded like you knew what they meant, and then spent the drive home quietly calculating what you actually have. Maybe it was the article you read at midnight about inflation. The one with the chart that showed what $1 from 10 years ago is worth today, and you realized your savings account, the one you've been quietly proud of, has been losing value in real terms every single year, while you watched the balance go up and felt good about it. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe it was just a Tuesday. You opened your banking app and looked at the number and thought, I have been putting money here for years, and I have nothing to show for it that feels like progress. The balance exists, but it doesn't feel like it's going anywhere. It just sits there, safe and still and slowly, invisibly, being eaten by the cost of everything getting more expensive. That is the moment. The moment you start to understand that safe and growing are not the same thing, that keeping money is not the same as building it, that there is a difference between a savings account and an investment account that goes beyond interest rates and risk tolerance, that goes all the way down to what kind of financial life you are actually building. And at 35, that question has weight in a way it didn't at 25. Level 3, the reality check. Before we go any further, you need to understand what is actually happening to money that just sits in a savings account. Not as a criticism, as a fact. In the United States, the average traditional savings account interest rate as of 2024 sits around 0.45% annually, according to the FDIC. High-yield savings accounts, the ones people rightly recommend for emergency funds, currently offer somewhere between 4.5% and 5.5% depending on the institution. That sounds reasonable until you factor in inflation. The Federal Reserve targets 2% inflation annually. In recent years, that number has been considerably higher. Even at the target rate, a savings account returning 0.45% is losing purchasing power every single year. You have more dollars. Those dollars buy less. That is not growth. That is managed decline. In Canada, the Bank of Canada's benchmark rate influences savings rates across the country. As of 2024, high-interest savings accounts at major Canadian institutions offer between 3% and 5% for promotional periods, with standard rates considerably lower. Meanwhile, Statistics Canada data shows that Canada's inflation rate has averaged well above 2% in recent years, peaking significantly higher during 2022 and 2023. The math is the same. Savings accounts in Canada are not keeping pace with the real cost of living for most Canadians. In Australia, the Reserve Bank of Australia's cash rate changes have pushed some savings account rates above 5% as of 2024 for introductory periods. The Australian Bureau of Statistics shows inflation running between 3% and 4% in recent quarters. The spread is narrower in Australia right now than in other markets. But the fundamental reality holds. A savings account is not a wealth-building tool. It is a wealth-preserving tool. And even preservation is not guaranteed when inflation is involved. Now look at the other side. The S&P 500, the index that tracks the 500 largest publicly traded companies in the United States, has returned an average of approximately 10% annually before inflation over the last 50 years. Adjusted for inflation, that figure sits around 7%. That is not every year. Some years it returns 25%. Some years it loses 20%. But over time, consistently the average direction is up. The ASX 200, Australia's equivalent index, has historically returned around 9% to 10% annually, including dividends over long periods. Canada's TSX Composite has similarly averaged around 8% to 9% annually over the long term. The gap between what money does in a savings account and what it does in a broadly diversified index fund over 30 years is not a small gap. It is the difference between a number that exists and a number that changes your life. That is the reality check. Not to shame saving. Saving has a role, a critical one, but it has to be the right role. Level 4, the actual numbers. Let's make this concrete, because concrete is the only thing that cuts through the noise. You are 35. You have $10,000 to start with, and you can set aside $500 a month going forward. 2 paths, same money, same person. Different destination. Path 1. You save everything. You put the $10,000 in a high-yield savings account earning 4.5% annually. You add $500 every month. In 30 years, at age 65, you have approximately $430,000. That is not nothing. That is real money built through real discipline. But here is what inflation does to it. At a 2.5% average inflation rate over 30 years, the purchasing power of that $430,000 in today's dollars is closer to $205,000. You saved diligently for 3 decades and ended up with the equivalent of roughly $205,000 in today's money. Path 2. You invest everything. You put the $10,000 in a broadly diversified index fund. You add $500 every month. At a 7% average annual return, adjusted for inflation over 30 years, you have approximately $680,000 in today's purchasing power. Same $500 a month. Same starting point. Same 30 years. The difference is $475,000 in real purchasing power. That is not a rounding error. That is a retirement. That is the difference between working because you want to and working because you have to. In Canada, running the same numbers through an RRSP or TFSA invested in a low-cost index ETF tracking the global market produces a similar outcome. The tax advantages of the RRSP reduce your taxable income today, while the TFSA protects your growth from tax entirely. The Canadian investor using these vehicles consistently over 30 years is not just investing. They are compressing the timeline through tax efficiency. In Australia, the superannuation system already does some of this work automatically. Your employer contributes at least 11% of your earnings into super as of 2024. But the investment options inside your super fund matter enormously. The default option is often a balanced fund. Switching to a growth option with higher equity exposure, something that most super funds offer and most members never do, can meaningfully change your outcome over 30 years. The difference between a balanced fund returning 5% and a growth fund returning 7% compounded over 30 years on a $50,000 starting balance is approximately $120,000 in final value. One conversation with your super fund. One form. $120,000. Level 5, the turn. Here is what nobody tells you about this conversation. It is not actually save versus invest. That framing is wrong and it keeps people stuck. The real framework is sequencing. What comes first, what comes second, and what that order means for your actual life. First comes the buffer. Before anything goes into an investment account, you need a buffer. 3 to 6 months of essential living expenses sitting in a high-yield savings account that you do not touch unless the thing you are protecting against actually happens. In the United States, Bankrate data consistently shows that a significant percentage of Americans cannot cover a $1,000 emergency without going into debt. In Canada, the Canadian Payroll Association reports similar fragility. In Australia, the Reserve Bank's own surveys show that a material portion of households have limited liquid savings outside of superannuation. The buffer is not optional, it is the foundation. Without it, every market dip becomes a personal crisis, and every unexpected expense becomes a reason to stop investing. The savings account is not your wealth-building tool. It is your stability tool. Use it as that. Second comes the match. If you are in the United States and your employer offers a 401k with a matching contribution, contributing at least enough to capture the full match is the single highest returning financial move available to you. A 50% match on contributions up to 6% of salary is a 50% immediate return before any investment growth occurs. There is no savings account, no investment strategy, no financial product that competes with that. In Canada, some employers offer group RRSP matching. Same logic applies. In Australia, your employer is already contributing, but salary sacrificing additional amounts into super, particularly if you are in a higher marginal tax bracket, is one of the most efficient wealth-building moves available. Third comes the investment. Once the buffer exists and the match is captured, every additional dollar available for the future belongs in a broadly diversified, low-cost investment vehicle. In the US, a Roth IRA for its tax-free growth, up to $7,000 annually as of 2024. In Canada, the TFSA for its flexibility and tax-free compounding. In Australia, a growth option inside your super fund, or a separately managed investment account for amounts beyond super caps. This is not complicated. The steps are clear. The math is documented. The only thing that makes it hard is starting. And starting at 35, with everything you now understand about what the numbers actually do over time, is not late. It is exactly on time for the life you are building from here. Level 6, the plan. Let's put real numbers on this because real numbers are what turn intention into movement. In the United States, a 35-year-old earning the median household income of approximately $75,000 annually, redirecting 15% toward a combination of 401k and Roth IRA contributions, is setting aside roughly $937 a month. That is $500 going into the employer-matched 401k, capturing the full match, and the remaining $437 going into a Roth IRA. Invested in a low-cost total market index fund at a 7% average annual return over 30 years, that monthly contribution grows to approximately $1.1 million. The Social Security Administration reports the average monthly benefit in 2023 at approximately $100 to $800 at full retirement age. That is a floor, not a ceiling. Your investments build above it. In Canada, a 35-year-old contributing $1,000 per month split between an RRSP and a TFSA, invested in a low-cost index ETF, at a 6.5% average annual return over 30 years arrives at approximately $900,000. CPP at maximum provides roughly $1,364 per month as of 2024 at full retirement age. OASATS adds a further $700 per month approximately. Combined with personal savings, that is a retirement that works. In Australia, a 35-year-old with a current super balance of $30,000, receiving the compulsory 11% employer contribution on a $70,000 salary, and making additional voluntary contributions of $300 per month, invested in a growth option returning 7% annually, arrives at approximately $650 to $700,000 at age 67. ASFA's comfortable retirement standard for a single person requires approximately $595,000. You are above it, not comfortably, but above it. And voluntary contributions pushed higher, even modestly, change that picture significantly. These numbers are not guarantees. Markets move, inflation changes, life intervenes. But they are realistic projections built on documented historical returns, and they answer the question that actually matters. Not whether you can retire. Whether you can retire with options. Whether 65-year-old you gets to choose, or whether 65-year-old you is still choosing based on what they can afford. Level 7, the reframe. Here's what I need you to hear before we finish. The person who figures out the save versus invest question at 35 is not behind. They are exactly where the math needs them to be to still build something real. The 30 years between 35 and 65 invested consistently in low-cost, broadly diversified index funds is enough runway to build wealth that changes not just your retirement, but the way you move through the next 3 decades. The buffer that sits in your savings account is not wasted money. It is the reason you will not have to sell investments at the wrong time. It is the psychological infrastructure that makes long-term investing possible. Saving and investing are not opponents. They are sequenced partners. One makes the other sustainable. You know something now that you did not know when you opened this video. You know the real numbers. You know the real gap. You know that the high-yield savings account that felt safe was quietly losing the race to inflation. You know that the index fund that felt risky was quietly, year by year, doing the only thing that actually matters over long periods. It was growing. And you know the sequence. Buffer first. Match second. Invest the rest. Not someday. Not when you figure out the perfect strategy. Now, with whatever is available, automated so that the decision is made once and then simply kept. The question was who wins, save or invest? The honest answer is neither wins alone. But together, in the right order, for the right purposes, they build something that a savings account alone never could, and an investment account without a foundation never would. You are 35. The runway is real, the math is on your side. The only move left is the first one. Start today, not tomorrow, not this weekend. Today. Subscribe if this gave you something you needed, because the next conversation is one you are going to want to have. See you in the next one.